you don't necessarily want to wait that long, and there's no guarantee you're going to survive the heart attack. So, I'm always about like, you're going to have to invest at some point. Just figure out when do you want to do that.
Welcome to Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Maxed Out Man podcast. Today I'm going to be here with Dr. Michael Twyman. Before we get started, I did want to mention we had a few technical difficulties, so bear with me for a couple of minutes. If you're watching this on video, you will see a thumbnail, but then we'll get right into it as I do this intro separately in post, as they say. Hey, before I also get started, I did want to mention I have a couple of spots open for coaching, so if you'd like to work with me on pretty much anything, we can talk about business, life, marriage, kids, hot rods, jeeping, whatever you want to talk about, I am ready to do it. I'd love to work with you and also to help you with anything you need help with. So go and shoot me an email at kd@maxedoutman.com and just answer a couple of questions, why you want to work with me and what you hope to get out of coaching. Super easy. That way I can see whether or not it's a good fit. I'll send you an email back and an application. We can go from there. So let me get Dr. Twyman's bio and we'll get going. Michael Twyman, MD, is a heart attack prevention expert, the founder of Apollo Cardiology, and a board-certified cardiologist. As a highly sought-after speaker and podcast guest, Mito Mike has been featured on multiple influential platforms such as Dr. Gabriel Lyons' show, the Mind, Body, Green podcast with Jason Wackham, and the Unflame Me documentary on Amazon. Having worked with world-class athletes and high-performing entrepreneurial influencers, Dr. Twyman's mission is to educate his patients on how to live better and longer by optimizing their mitochondrial function to become heart attack proof. So thanks for bearing with me on the technical issues. Let's get on with the episode.
Give me an idea of kind of why you got into this, what you're doing now, and hopefully how we can change the industry as a whole, and just kind of spell it out for us. Give us a little bit more background.
Well, thank you for the opportunity today, Dad, to kind of share this message. I consider myself a proactive preventive cardiologist. That's probably the best term. Mm-hmm. I was a conventionally trained invasive cardiologist for many years, took care of many, many heart attacks in the middle of the night. And while it was rewarding to take care of patients when they're extremely sick, I always kind of felt bad that some of them didn't make it. And I always thought, like, maybe there's a better way, because if it was just about statins and beta blockers and aspirin, we wouldn't be having these, midnight trips to the cath lab. So put me down the rabbit hole, first figuring out about vascular health through a functional medicine lens. I know we'll probably dive into endothelial health and inflammation and such as we go today. Mm-hmm. But eventually got to the point where even just adding more supplements and lifestyle interventions weren't enough to prevent the events. So that's when I kind of discovered the biohacking world, the quantum biology world, and that's the blue blocking glasses and such. Mm-hmm. And so then I really kind of pieced it together. Oh, circadian biology is extremely important. If you don't optimize your light environment, you're not going to optimize your vascular health. And that's why there's a huge mitochondria behind me. And sometimes I go by Mito Mike online and such, is that if your mitochondria don't work well, nothing's going to work well. So I kind of got interested in doing this, many years ago. And eventually 5 years ago, decided this is what I just want to focus on. I'm not going to do anything more in the hospital. I'm just going to focus on helping patients kind of really get to the root cause of their vascular concerns. And the practice launched 5 years ago, and we're doing very well at this point.
That's awesome. So explain to those of us that are not, it's been a little while since my anatomy classes, which I actually did have. Explain what a mitochondria is, kind of what its function is, and really what happens in terms of disease or healthy mitochondria.
So the mitochondria are the organelles in your cells that make energy for you. So they take in foodstuffs, carbohydrates, and fats. They break them down to protons and electrons. And then outside the mitochondria, it's going to make water, carbon dioxide, ATP, and heat. ATP is one of the energy currencies, but the water is also very important. So without energy, you're not alive. That's what a corpse is. And the brain and the heart are the most energy-dense organs that have the most mitochondria. So that's probably why most chronic diseases start in one of those two organs. And right now, about every 40 seconds, somebody's having a heart attack in the United States. So There's a lot of mitochondrial dysfunction. And so when you understand that it's the pillars of light, water, magnetism, and if you get those pillars right, you can support the mitochondria, you probably are really reducing some of these cardiovascular events.
Wow. Yeah. That's, So explain like the blue blocker, like go into, I guess let's just walk through kind of your methodology if you want to, in terms of like how we, what we're doing for prevention, some of the biohacking stuff and all that. Cause it's really like, this is kind of new territory for me. I mean, I'm familiar with red light therapy, blue blocking. We do it really as part of a sleep hygiene thing when we do the blue blocking thing, but obviously you're wearing it during the day. And so kind of walk me through some of those things.
So I kind of talk about 4 pillars of health: exercise, nutrition, stress management, and sleep. And they're all important. But if you only had to pick one, you got to sleep like a rock star, because without sleep, things are not going to go well. That's when your mitochondria repair themselves. So when you crush it in the gym, put all the stress on your body, if you don't sleep well, you're not going to recover from that stress. So the glasses that I'm wearing, for those that are watching it, these are the daytime blue blocking glasses. Anytime I'm inside and I'm not controlling the light environment, I have these things on because I don't want the melanopsin receptors in my eyes to be sensing more blue light than they should be. Blue light is not necessarily good or bad. Blue light from sunlight is always there to tell you what time of day it is to your body. The color of the sky changes throughout the day. So right now we're recording, it's around solar noon. So that's 5,500 Kelvin. So the body knows, oh, it's noontime. But then when the sun would set, no more blue photons of light hit the back of the retina, and the body gets a signal, oh, nighttime is starting. But our devices are set at the same color as solar noon. So I don't want to keep pinging my brain all day long that it's noontime. So these glasses that I'm currently wearing block about 40% of the blue light. And so I wear these anytime I'm in front of technology that I don't control the emission of the light from it. But the key time is post sunset. That's really when you don't want to be getting a lot of this artificial light in the back of the eyes. So there's different tints of these glasses. You can go for like the super hard biohacker ones, which are red. Those will block 100% of blue, 100% of green. But those things are so potent that if I put those on, I'll be asleep in half an hour. I rarely ever wear those things unless I'm traveling and trying to mitigate some jet lag. But the key time is post sunset. But if you're in front of technology, I still think it's worthwhile for most people to consider wearing these things.
And is that the difference between, so that, as I understand it, that's the difference between cortisol and melatonin, right? It's kind of like that variation. Is that, and does that, so doing it during the day, does that affect those cortisol levels and melatonin levels, or just a receptor thing, or how does that work?
No, good point. So, it's kind of like a seesaw, cortisol and melatonin. So when you get up in the morning time, ideally the first bright light that's getting into your eyes is going to be sunlight. And that blue light from the sun balanced with red light, is very kind of telling to the body it's morning time. It tells the supracosmic nucleus, the body's clock, what time of day it is. But blue light is going to start increasing cortisol. It tells the body, hey, it's morning time. Get ready to hunt, go gather, do what you need to do for the day. And melatonin is being produced during this time, but it's not going to be released until there's darkness. Then when the sun sets, the body gets signal. It's nighttime, no more blue light. So cortisol should start to drop. And the melatonin you were producing during the day starts to get released. But if you continue to look at backlit devices, or you have your LED lights on, the body keeps getting pinged with blue light. So cortisol is going to be high, and melatonin will keep staying suppressed. So it's very hard to have optimal sleep when you're going to sleep with low levels of melatonin. It's a hormone. It is not a supplement. So if you're not sleeping well, you have to look at your light environments first.
And is there a time? So we kind of follow this 3-2-1 kind of sleep thing, which is, no major meals 3 hours beforehand, no major brain function 2 hours beforehand, and then no blue light an hour. But is there an optimal time frame there? And I think so many of it, we started doing that at night, and people are like, that is so weird for you to do that. But I think it's something that people don't even recognize. But is there a time frame there that you really, at minimum, right? Like at minimum, this is the time frame.
No, I like that is a guideline. I usually recommend people stop eating 3 to 4 hours before their planned bedtime. Those are also known as a Zeitgeber, a time giver, is that signal of food coming into your system. So when your food comes in the system, the body thinks it's daytime. So the liver and the gut are going to stay awake when there's food in, and the body's going to wait about 4 hours before it shuts off the switch and say like, oh, he's probably not going to eat anymore, and then starts processing the food you ate. If you eat too close to bedtime, it's going to, cause your basic metabolic rate to be higher. Or I should say your kind of furnace, your temperature is going to be higher, and you're going to have less quality sleep most likely. So I like the idea of at least 3 hours before bed. The brain activity, yeah, I mean, it's one thing to watch kind of, entertainment TV, but it's another thing to watch like, highly politicized, social media and other things that get you really amped up. That's, going to cause problems with your sleep quality. And then, yes, bare minimum, I like people to really try to minimize their screens before bed if possible. TV is less bad than, a tablet right in front of your face. But if you're going to be using backlit devices, just make sure you're wearing your blue blocking glasses to kind of mitigate some of that exposure.
Yeah, we actually have the little clip-ons because I'm 51, so time for the readers, right? So I clip them on, and then we have a special one for the TV. That way we kind of switch back and forth, which is good. It's a good signal to put the phone away and then change my glasses. So yeah, for sure. So what you said there's a heart attack every 40 seconds. Now, what are some of the other things that are going on from a cardiovascular health standpoint? Obviously, it's been one of the top killers, especially in male population, which is who we're primarily talking about. Typically, I think most people think of that as a hey, 50-year-old, 60-year-old problem, right? And we've got a lot of younger guys that listen to this, so I want to make sure that we hit kind of this where we are now cardiovascularly as a country, as a society, and then kind of go through some of these preventative things that we want to focus on.
So cardiovascular disease is still the number one thing that takes most people out. So it starts early. By the time somebody has symptoms, this has been baking 20, 30, 40 years. So most people don't honestly show up to a cardiologist until they're having symptoms. They're having chest pain or shortness of breath or exercise intolerance. Then they go get a stress test. Go, oh, you failed your stress test. They go to the cath lab and potentially get a stent or bypass surgery. They're fixing stuff way late to the game. You want to try to find some people way before they're symptomatic. And plaque can actually start in your arteries, in your childhood, but you usually don't have enough plaque in your arteries to present to a doctor to your, in your 50s or 60s. So go looking earlier. And that's what my whole practice is designed to do, is try to find it at the earliest stages. So you have nearly 60,000 miles of blood vessels. There's a lining in the blood vessels called the glycocalyx and the endothelium. Think of it as a protective gel coat. If that gel coat is healthy, you don't tend to develop plaque in your arteries. But there's many things that damage that gel coat. Smoking, which fortunately most people aren't smoking anymore, high blood pressure, high blood sugars, high lipoproteins, cholesterol, which I'm sure we'll probably talk more about, viruses, air pollution. There's hundreds of things that can damage this protective gel coat. But once that coating is damaged, then things that are floating through the blood, such as the lipoproteins, they start sticking to the arteries like Velcro, and then they get retained in the artery lining. And then that's kind of like getting a splinter, in your foot. It's going to cause inflammation. There's going to be swelling. And that's what's kind of the nidus to starting these plaques to form. And these plaques can grow for many years before you have symptoms. Think of them as like little pimples on the walls of the artery. You can't feel them until they're like 70 to 80% occluding the blood flow in the artery. But any amount of plaque in the artery potentially could rupture, and it would be like a pimple popping. When that happens, the blood will clot or coagulate, and now you have 100% blockage in your artery. And if it's in your heart, that's a heart attack. If it's in your carotid artery, it's going to cause a stroke. It's a similar process. So you want to start looking at how healthy is that layer of the artery? Is there inflammation in the artery wall? And then there's various tests that we can talk about that look at soft plaque or hard plaque in your artery. The more plaque in your artery, the higher the risk you will have an event.
So, with health, with medical information, right? It's like there's so much, it's just a moving target to really know what's going on, right? Because there becomes this like causation versus correlation argument. There's which data are you believing and which data are you not believing? So like take something like cholesterol, right? And now we're with the whole statin thing and the studies that came on. Can you walk me through a little bit of that? Because I've heard, I've listened to different people, obviously on podcasts or reading the papers or whatever. They're like, no, cholesterol is not a big deal. It's totally fine. And then we have doctors that are for example, one of my family members, she's in her 70s, very old school doctor that basically said, she doesn't really exercise. She doesn't, lift weights. She doesn't really do anything, right? Like it's that generation. The doctor's like, well, you don't really have to change anything. I'm just going to put you on a statin. So she's been on a statin for many, many years, which I'd love to hear more your thoughts on cholesterol and statins in particular, just because there's so much crazy information. I think this would be a good point of education for people.
So you usually start off with that, cholesterol is not bad for you. Without cholesterol, you're not going to be alive. You need cholesterol to make your testosterone, your other hormones. You need it for cell membranes. You need it for bile acids. You need it for the cell membranes themselves. So without cholesterol, you're not alive. But you don't necessarily want cholesterol building up in the walls of your arteries. That's contributing to plaque formation, which increases the risk of heart attacks or strokes. How does the cholesterol get into your artery? That's the story. It's the lipoproteins. So because cholesterol is a waxy compound, it cannot float in your liquid blood. That would be like oil and vinegar. So the body makes these compounds called lipoproteins. They're lipid protein carriers. Think of them as a cargo ship. So the cargo ship fills up full of cholesterol, triglycerides, which is essentially energy for your cells. There's phospholipids, which are building blocks for the cells. And then your fat-soluble vitamins, the A's, the D's, the E's, and K's, all go inside these cargo ships. And then these cargo ships are being ferried through your blood vessels. If your blood vessel lining is healthy, that glycocalyx is healthy, it just slides on by. It goes down to your muscle, and your muscle downloads the triglycerides and says, thank you for this energy. Eventually, those lipoproteins, they're going to make its way back to the liver. The liver's going to pluck them out of circulation, break them down, and they're eliminated through the gut. That's how cholesterol leaves your body, is through the gut. But if you've damaged the lining of your arteries, these lipoproteins get attracted there like Velcro. And that's where the cascade of plaque will form. So you want to try to figure out, why is the artery getting damaged? The cholesterol is not necessarily the initial instigator. It's always going to be present in the plaque, but it's not as simple as saying, like, take a stand, don't change anything. That's kind of the fallacy, is that, when I was back in the cath lab, taking care of these people who were very sick, many of these patients were already on statins. If statins were all magical, nobody would have heart attacks. They are a tool, and I use them in the right population, but they don't always repair all the damage. Sterols are just one of the things. There's 400 things that damage your arteries, and you got to go looking deeper at what's damaging the arteries first. But statins, they lower the cholesterol pool in the liver. So the liver makes less cholesterol when statins are being utilized. They block an enzyme that's necessary for cholesterol to be produced. So if you make less cholesterol in the liver, you then have less lipoproteins, less cargo ships ferrying those through the blood vessels. An analogy is somewhat like shots on goal. The less of them floating through the artery, the less shots on goal for the artery lining to see this, the less likely some of them are getting stuck there. So they do work for people, but they tend to work in people who have, familial hyperlipidemia. They have a genetic abnormality where they're just cranking out tons and tons of these lipoproteins, or they've already demonstrated that whatever caused the damage to their lining of the arteries, they've already developed a significant amount of plaque. And you're just trying to prevent the second time that they're going to have a heart attack, a stroke. And so that's the case where statins have significant data, is that secondary prevention. You're trying to not have it happen again. Where it gets sometimes gray zone is primary prevention. Somebody who's in their 40s says, I feel great, my cholesterol is high, and my doctor's offering a statin. Should I take it? And I always tell them, you need more data. Just the blood work alone isn't the answer. The blood work is literally just like taking a picture. What you need is a video. Where are these lipoproteins going? If they're going to your muscles and dropping off triglycerides, cool. But if they're going into your artery lining and developing plaque, that's the problem. So look at the arteries. That's what you really need to focus on.
Is that like an angiogram? What kind of testing do you do typically for that? Because to your point, I think that's the thing. It's like high cholesterol. Well, you've never had a heart attack. You have no history of any of this. You exercise, all that kind of stuff. Let's put you on a statin. That's definitely not like, that's like a shotgun approach to medicine. Only like we have this one really big bullet that we're going to try to shoot,
Yeah, I mean, an angiogram is one way, but the invasive angiograms, which I used to perform, you wouldn't have got that unless you were having symptoms, you're having cardiac angina, shortness of breath, or you failed the stress test, or you actually were having a heart attack. So it's not a screening test. But there are CT coronary angiograms, which can be done in patients who are not symptomatic. And that's one of the preferred tests that I will use in certain individuals to really kind of judge, well, how much plaque do they actually have on the walls of their artery. There's another test that I often recommend pretty much any man over 35 consider, is a CT coronary calcium scan. That test is a low-dose radiation scan that looks for hard calcified plaque in your coronary arteries. Calcium is supposed to be in your bones and in your teeth. It's not supposed to be in your arteries. Right. So your calcium score really should be a big 0 forever. But generally, if you live long enough, you're going to develop some degree of plaque. You just want that to be in your seventh, eighth, ninth decade. You don't want this calcium score test to be positive when you're in your 30s or 40s. Those are the people that have likely some genetic predisposition to having atherosclerosis. And if they don't do something about it, they're the people having heart attacks in their 50s and 60s. So the calcium score test is a good risk stratifier. If your score is 0, your risk of having a heart attack over the next 10 years is very low, a little over 1%. But if your calcium score is over 1,000, which I've seen in people under 40, your risk of having a heart attack is over 30% in 10 years. So 30x increased risk of having a heart attack. That's what you're trying to prevent, is the events. And so the calcium score test is a really good test for people as long as they've not already had an event. If you've already had a heart attack, a stent, or bypass surgery, you're high risk. Treat that person such as high risk. But for somebody who's more health minded and like, hey, am I at risk? That's a good tiebreaker test.
And where do you get that done? Is that just like something you can go into your GP and say, hey, I want to have this test done? Or are there particular places that you need to go to have that done?
They're done at many hospital systems and freestanding radiology clinics. If you just go into the Google machine, type CT coronary calcium scan near me, you should be able to find like 5 to 10 in most big cities. The cost of the test is generally between $100 and $250. There's no special prep for it. You don't need an IV. You don't need any particular medications to be given before you get it. And it can be ordered by a primary care doctor. It does require an order because it does require ionizing radiation. So you can't just walk off the street. You need somebody to, quote, order the test for you. But a primary care doctor can order it. It does not have to be a cardiologist.
Okay. And if, let's say that you go in and you have the test done and you actually show some risk factor, like you show any kind of calcification, are there lifestyle things? That's always the argument with, and I want you to get into this in depth as deeply as you'd like, but it's always this lifestyle versus genetics versus, preventative care versus treatment, right? Can you walk through some of that? Like if I've got the calcium as an example, or any other high risk factor that's been identified, what's kind of the next step in general, right? Like obviously each patient's going to be different.
Sure. And this is what we do at our practice is patients come in already having the scan, or that's what they want when they're coming to see us. And so I always talk about like there's a biophysical and a biochemical approach. So the biophysical is looking at the arteries. So if you already come in and your calcium score is abnormal, we're trying to do other tests to say like, is this calcium score test old? Like you developed plaque 10 years ago and your body took care of it? Or is this still a problem right now? Do you still have a 5-alarm fire going on? So there's tests that can look at that protective lining of the artery, the endothelium. So there's tests that look at how elastic the arteries are. It's called the max pulse or pulse wave velocity test. There's a test that looks at how well your body can produce nitric oxide, which is the gas that dilates the arteries, prevents things from sticking to the arteries. That test is called an endopat. That one's a little bit more challenging to get. It's a more specialized tool, but it tells you exactly percentage-wise how much the arteries dilate when there's a vascular stressor. This is essentially what happens when you exercise. As you exercise, you force blood over your arteries are dilating. We're able to measure that and quantify it for the person that it's healthy or not healthy. Then you can look at the arteries on the side of your neck. There's a test called a carotid entomomedial thickness scan. It's an ultrasound, no radiation, relatively low cost, and generally you can repeat it every 12 months and say, okay, my arteries are staying pretty steady. Or if you see a lot of inflammation in the artery, or you see the plaques getting worse, then you got to be much more aggressive with the things you're going to find in the blood work. So we'll kind of stage the arteries saying like, okay, this is old, or is this still ongoing? And then the big biochemical assessment. So typically you use either Boston Heart Diagnostics or Cleveland Heart Labs. They're the two kind of leaders for doing the advanced cardiovascular testing. But it's 3 big buckets. There's testing that's going to look at the lipoproteins, all your cholesterol metrics. There's a bucket that looks at all the oxidative stress and inflammation. So you're breathing oxygen right now speaking to me. You're burning the foods that you ate in your mitochondrial engines. But that makes free radicals. It makes smoke essentially. So you can measure like how much of that smoke is escaping the mitochondria and damaging other cells. How much inflammation is present. You want your immune system to kick on if you got an infection. You don't want your immune system always turned on. If your immune system's always turned on, those 60,000 miles of blood vessels are transporting those inflammatory compounds, and it's going to damage the lining of the arteries. And then the third big bucket is, are there anything that are going to impede your body's ability to make nitric oxide? Nitric oxide is so critical that if you develop low nitric oxide availability, you're much more prone to having stiff arteries, higher blood pressure. And then if that persists, those are the people that go on to developing plaque in their arteries. So there's labs that can look at all 3 of those kind of domains. And you're like, okay, these are the lifestyle interventions that are going to help this one. These are the nutraceuticals if you want to go down that route. And then you can look at certain pharmaceuticals depending on their person's risk. And so, back to your original question about statins, they're tools, but the people who tend to respond best to them, this makes more sense when you do this blood work. They're going to be hyper producers of sterols. So their liver's just cranking out lots of cholesterol. So it's like dialing the faucet back. That's why you would use a statin there. They're an ApoE3 or 2 carrier. If you're an ApoE4 carrier, they tend not to respond as well to statins. So that's a genetic test. There's another genetic test called SLC01B1. It's long term, but that gene, if you have it, your risk of having muscle symptoms on statins, which is the number one side effect of statins, it can be 4 to 5 times increased. And so those are the people that maybe don't challenge with statins, or if you're going to, use the absolute lowest dose possible, because you don't want to cause side effects that then is going to limit the person's ability to exercise, which is obviously proven to really promote that person's health span and longevity. So, I always talk with patients like, they're tools. If you have side effects from them, we will find another option. But you can kind of predict who's more likely to respond to them based off of some of these blood work markers.
My assumption is, maybe this is the wrong assumption, but most doctors are not doing those tests when they put people on statins, or is that, is that true, or is that or not true?
No, that's true. And it's just because that's how the guidelines are written. Yeah, the guidelines are put together by experts, and they're looking at all the clinical data, and they're saying that in totality, in the general population, this medication should work. But while that's interesting for population, I'm interested in the person who's sitting in front of me. Like, how was it going to respond to this individual? And so I'm definitely practicing medicine, to the standard of care. I'm still board certified. I can do all the stuff that those guys do, but I've done hundreds, if not thousands of hours of extra training to learn functional medicine, quantum biology, and how to piece those things together.
Yeah. I had another guest that was a physician, and we were talking about this term boutique medicine, right? And I don't know whether that's something that which is essentially like, you've got the insurance side, right? Which I know I've got physician, friends that are like, I'm going to go be a landscaper now because I'm tired. My podiatrist started a landscaping company because he got so tired of dealing with insurance. But now it seems like there's a growing, not only need, but want and availability of doc practices like yours, right? Where I can go in and get over and above what I would get if I'm dealing with the traditional healthcare system. Is that kind of where your practice falls?
Correct. Yeah. When I launched the practice about 5 years ago, I was out of network from the beginning because I wanted to deal with just the patient. I did not want the insurance company to tell me that I could not order this test if it was indicated. I didn't want the insurance company to say like, well, you have to use this class of medicine. So that's when I have a little bit more kind of transparency with patients. I'm not paid by the drug companies. I'm not paid by the insurance companies. I work for you. So if I'm recommending a statin for you, it's because I think that's the best option for you. It's not that I'm getting paid to say that for you. And so I can be very transparent in my pricing with the patients and what my interests are. I tell them like, I learned this at this event. I've done this with, this many patients. It seems to work. Are you interested in this approach? And they go that route. It's not just cookbook medicine where it's just like the algorithm says your cholesterol is high. And if it's over this cut point, this is the dose of statin you should take.
Yeah. And it's such a, we've got physicians and, I have kind of a naturopath that does some stuff, general stuff. I'm rarely sick, so I don't really have to do much in the healthcare world. But my wife and I just met with a doctor. She's my age, so about to be 51. So she's in that perimenopausal thing. And so we're kind of going through that, but we're dealing with a physician that is not in the, her other doctor's like, well, you're 50. This is what your life is like now. But to be able to go to this other physician and have him spend 90 minutes on a Zoom call with us, and then, we pay accordingly, right? It's not cheap. You don't have your $25 copay, but to me, it's like it's almost like going back in time to what you think doctors, were like 30, 40, 50 years ago.
And that's why I tell people, like, you're going to invest in your health at some point in your life. You're going to do it when you're young and you get to have that health span, or you can do it late in life, and then you're going to spend a lot of money trying to regain what you just lost. You're going to spend the money somewhere in your life. So it's better to kind of proactively do it, in my opinion. A heart attack, if you have a heart attack, today, and insurance wasn't trying to pick up the cost for it, it's going to cost you nearly $50,000 if you have a heart attack out of pocket. If you invest wisely in your health, you're probably not going to spend $50,000 to avoid the heart attack. But some people just don't have that mindset that they're in it for the prevention standpoint. They'll wait until they have symptoms, like my insurance company will cover them. Like, you don't necessarily want to wait that long, and there's no guarantee you're going to survive the heart attack. So, I'm always about, like, you're going to have to invest at some point. Just figure out when do you want to do that.
Yeah, you don't want to. I did my my internship at Blue Cross Blue Shield, and this was back when they actually had wellness care and all this stuff. But we called them the Zipper Club. I've been super blessed to be able to feed into the lives of tons of men from all around the world and all walks of life. And I'm very excited to announce that I do have a couple of spots available right now. If you're interested in working with me, and we can talk about pretty much anything: marriage, business, fitness, parenting, being a dad, dogs, cars, whatever you want to talk about, I'm available to do that. We want to focus on the things that may be most beneficial to you, and some things that you may not even know would be beneficial to you. You've listened to the podcast, you kind of know my style. If you are interested in working with me, I want to try to make it as simple as possible, but I also want to make sure we're a good fit. Send an email to coaching@maxedoutman.com and just give me 2 pieces of information: why you would like to work with me, and what that might mean for you, what things you would hope to accomplish by meeting with me. That'll kick off the process. I'll reach back out to you. We can jump on a call and see whether or not it would be a good fit. So go to maxedoutman.com, coaching@maxedoutman.com. Send me an email with those 2 pieces of information, and we'll see if it's a good fit. And I hope it is, and I hope that we can actually connect. Right? Like,
Right.
we had all those guys that, if you don't know what the Zipper Club is, because they basically crack your entire chest open and then they sew you back together with a bunch of wires. I don't know if that's how they still do it, but but your chest looks like a zipper, right? So spend the money now, spend the time now. And unfortunately, it's an unfortunate thing with our healthcare system that it's not only it's necessary that we have to do that we can't get actual good care with insurance, but it is, and that's not all doctors, but I like that this is available. So if I'm a 30-year-old male, if I'm a 50 or 60-year-old male, what are these things that you lean into from a preventative medicine standpoint? Like, what things should I be doing? What things should I not be doing? We talked about smoking. Everybody knows about smoking now, obviously, but like these young people are smoking weed like crazy, and they think that it's no big deal. It's still, so feel free to comment on that. I had the guy that advocates, and it was super interesting. He's the guy that intercedes for the marijuana industry with Congress. Very cool episode if you want to go. I learned a lot. I don't do any drugs or alcohol or any of that kind of stuff, but and then vaping obviously is another big one. Can you just walk through some of like, what things should you be doing in these different decades of life, if they change, or maybe it's just standard, and what things should you not be doing, and kind of how we get to a point where we are doing everything we can without intervention to maximize our cardiovascular and overall health.
Sure. So big topic, and we'll unpack it, for all age groups. But to kind of go back on one question part, like, hospitals do good work. If you're in an emergency, if you're having a heart attack, you want them to save your life. You've been banged up in a car accident, you want the trauma surgeons to put you back together. So they're doing good work, but they're not designed for preventive care. They're not designed to keep you out of the hospital. That's on you. And ideally, you have a doctor or a healthcare person that can work with you on that journey. Most of the things I'm going to talk about today, they're free. They're just things that people have to do and build them into their lifestyle. So, starting as young as possible, it's the 4 pillars. Find a way to prioritize sleep. Probably people in their 20s, you probably abuse your body, you stay out late, you party, you do whatever. But at some point, you got to realize, like, this is not sustainable. And then get into a routine where you're like, okay, your day starts with your head laying on the pillow, you charge up your batteries, and you dissipate it the next day. And try not to have 2 bad days of sleep in a row. If you're not sleeping well, always start with that. And a lot of it is your optimization of your circadian rhythms, your 24-hour cycles, what we were talking about earlier, your light cycles and the timing that you're eating your meals. Then stress. It's ubiquitous. We all have stress in this world. We're getting pinged 1,000 times a day, text messages, emails, DMs, but that isn't evolutionary what we were designed to do, to be that stimulated. So how do you dial that back down? Your body doesn't know the difference between 1,000 text messages and the tiger's chasing you. Mm-hmm. So what do you do to activate your parasympathetic branch? Are you a meditator? Are you somebody who's doing biofeedback or neurofeedback, or do you like some of the gadgets, the Apollo Neuros? do whatever you can do to stimulate your vagal tone to get that sympathetic and parasympathetic branch back into balance. Nutrition. I'm probably not going to go too deep into nutrition today. There's a lot of different, warring factions on it, but I'll just make it simple. Food, if it's real food from Mother Nature, it's tied to photosynthesis. So you're either eating plants or you're eating animals that ate the plants, and then it's the job of your mitochondria to break that back down into light energy inside your mitochondria. That's as simple as to kind of make it for nutrition. And then exercise. You need some combination of strength training so that you have the muscle mass that you need to get you through time and space to your 80, 90 years old. But your muscle is also very important for your metabolism. There's different interleukins and things that keep inflammation down. This is a lot of the things that my friend Dr. Line talks about online. And then there's some amount of cardiorespiratory fitness you need. So your VO2 max is a very good hallmark to look at what is your propensity to have longevity. And that's mostly trained by the higher level of exercise. So more interval type training. But most people, they need a lot more zone 2 type training. You need to build your mitochondrial efficiency with the lower and slower cardio. If you get those 4 levers right, you pretty much avoid 80, 90% of chronic diseases. Now there's, certain genetic things that are going to put people at higher risk, but those are the exceptions. The basics are the basics for a reason, and people just got to find a way that they can hold themselves accountable to sticking to those things.
Yeah, that's the cost, right? It's free except for time. I had a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine who was a previous guest, Justin Rosling's chauffeur, which is a mouthful, which he admits. But he's really big into rest. But we were talking about the cost we were talking about the cost in terms of, all right, your 50-year-old health and fitness self has a higher cost than when you were 20, right? Like it takes more time, it takes more effort, it takes more deliberate action. And, that's health, nutrition, cardio, all of that. But it really I would rather, to your point, I'd rather give up the time now, making sure that when I'm 50, I'm healthier now at 50 than I was at 20. I want to be just as healthy when I'm 80. Obviously, there's things that happen. Both my maternal grandmother and great grandmother lived to be 103. So I'm halfway there if I'm genetically gifted from that. But, versus I don't want to give that time up with rehab and PT and, surgeries and all of those things. Like you'd rather go down that road. So I think that's super important. When you talk about LISS, right? Low intensity, steady state cardio, which is essentially going out and taking a brisk walk. They had this movement a few years ago, which is basically just get up and do something, even 10 minutes, which 10 minutes, that sounds like an okay idea, but that's not entirely true, right? Like what is the real number that we need to shoot for on a daily basis? Obviously weight training for me, I tell women, especially if you're not lifting weights, you need to do that now. Like if you don't do anything else, go lift weights. But talk to me about frequency and intensity on those, both those things would be great.
So yes, it has to be a combination of those things. Strength training, bare minimum twice a week. If you're not, kind of a gym rat, just to maintain what you got, you definitely just want to slow the roll on sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass. And then the cardio, you can do it with walking, but typically, unless somebody's untrained, they're probably going to have to do some type of incline, or they're going to have like a weighted vest or something like that to be able to get their heart rate enough up with just walking alone. So more zone 2 type of training, the low and slow. More likely you can do it like on a treadmill, a bike, an elliptical, somewhere you can actually keep the heart rate pretty steady. My personal zone 2 training goal right now is 128 beats a minute. It doesn't feel much like exercise, so I'm mostly doing it on a bike, and so I can just dial the resistance. Heart rate hits around 128. Stop it.
Do it.
Just keep doing it at that rate then. But that should be about 80% of the time of whatever cardio that you're doing is that lower and slower type of cardio. How much per week? Ideally, at least 150 minutes of that type of activity. You can go more, but most people aren't even remotely even close to 150 minutes. So, chunk it down to, a couple of 30-minute sessions a week, and there you go.
Yeah. That's only 5 times a week, right? Like that's just doing it during the week. And, we talk about, taking a 5-minute walk after meals, fake 10-minute walk after meals. So it doesn't you could even split it. You could split up a little bit, but obviously you want that sustained in that zone for that 150 minutes, right? Is that what you're talking about mainly?
Correct.
Yeah. but it's not that hard. It really it takes so little effort. And if you think about the amount of time on our phones, watching Netflix, all that stuff, which, get on your treadmill if you want to watch Netflix and actually just do your cardio while you watch your show. It's not that big a deal. So, well, I want to be respectful of your time. I think we covered like the preventative stuff, like your basics. Is there anything that we're missing in terms of like things that you would recommend that we do in order to kind of step into this more preventative care when it comes to heart health, especially?
So I'd first start with like optimize your circadian rhythms to the best of your ability. So an optimal day would look something similar to this. You'd be up around sunrise. You'd get morning light into your eyes from the sun. That's the first bright light that you would get. So no glasses, no sunglasses, natural light in your eyes. You do not have to see the sun actually break the horizon. So if there's a hill or mountain in front of you, you just have to be outside. How long? The sicker you are, the more you're going to need. But 5, 15 minutes, that's probably a good starting point. I personally just like to go for a walk at that time of the day, just clear the mind and get ready for the day. You ideally would eat your first meal within an hour of the sunrise. That helps set the leptin receptor in your body. That helps let your body know how much stored body fat you have. Your body burns food differently based off the time of day that food comes into the system. You should stop eating 4 hours before you plan to go to bed so that the liver and gut can shut off. And then we talked a lot about the light. If you're inside using technology, ideally you have some type of glasses that filter out some of that high intensity blue light that reaches your melanopsin receptor. But be very tight about it once the sun sets. Your body really wants to crave that there's a big light and dark cycle. Once you got that dialed in, then that's when you can really start playing around with, the nutrition, the exercise, because those are just variables. If you don't get the sleep and the light right, that other stuff doesn't matter nearly as much.
Yeah, I like that a lot. We actually, the sun comes up at 4:30. We're in Montana, so we're up, 45th parallel, right? So the sun comes up at 4:30 in the morning, and it doesn't go down. It's starting to go down now, but it's like light at 10:30 at night. So we had to put up. I bought some darkening shades for so our bedroom is like pitch black, and so that's take whatever steps you need in order to create that good sleep hygiene. I think that's super important.
100%. Yeah. And that's definitely the case when you're that far north. I was in, Finland, the other year, and, there's 24 hours of light as well. And then there's 6 weeks where they have no light whatsoever. So it's like, how do you get around that? Well, you just still stick to a routine where the bright light in the morning is really the main thing. So, even though it's 4:30, that's really when your body should be up. And then if you got to go to bed before that, then you take, protective measures and dark room, eye mask, something that your body doesn't get that signal. Yeah. That's the one hack when I travel. Like I'm based in the central, standard time zone in St. Louis. A week or two ago, I was in Vegas for a business conference. I just stayed on St. Louis time. So I was going to bed at like 7 p.m. in Vegas and getting up at 3 a.m. in Vegas to stay on my regular schedule.
Which then that's a good plan if you're in Vegas anyway. You can avoid all the nuttiness that happns after after that time. So, Dr. Twyman, I really appreciate you being here, man, and thank you so much for the patience with some of the technical issues that we have. How would people find out more information about you, learn more about what you do, and if they need to reach out to you for whatever reason, especially if they're in your area, how would they do that?
So the social media platform I'm most active on is Instagram. My handle is just Dr. Twyman. Every Monday, 6 p.m. Central Time, I do an Ask Me Anything. So people submit questions ahead of time, or when it's live, they can ask them in the comments and I'll answer them, usually on for about half an hour or so. And I also have a website, drtwyman.com, has some of the archives of the prior podcasts I've been on, and some of the products sometimes I recommend. People are like, what are those blue blockers? I'm like, it'll be on my website if you're interested. If patients really want us to kind of do the deep dive, figure out what's going on in their vascular health, we do have an application on my website. Somebody from my team would reach out, make sure that, we can, help you with the needs that you're interested in. And then we set you up for the visit in St. Louis and screen you head to toe, make sure those arteries are as healthy as you want them to be.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much.
All right. Let's see. Okay. I think we got it. I appreciate you taking the time. I know that yours is still recording. I'm going to just end the session, and then if you just let it run for a couple of minutes, it should be finished uploading. And then I think there's a lot of little bits that we can grab and do some. My VA will kind of grab those and do some cuts so that we can use those for shorts, and I'll make sure I get those to you, and you can use them for whatever you want.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks,
Appreciate
Dr.
it.
Twyman. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to go. I'll probably do cardio a little bit later.
Yeah, awesome.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, take
All
care.
right. Bye-bye.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.